One of the best upgrades you can make to your cyclocross bike is to run your wheels tubeless. Now, I'm not suggesting that you replace your race day tubular tyres here, but for general cyclocross riding, tubeless is amazing. There is no way of getting pinch flats, and there's also no more flats from sharp objects like thorns. Yep, that's right, you heard me correctly, no more punctures. Now I'll just let that sink in for a moment before telling you that setting up and looking after a tubeless setup is straightforward, although slightly different from regular inner tubes. So here is how to do it. Now firstly, it kind of goes without saying, but do make 100% sure that your wheels and tyres are actually tubeless compatible. Because although you can set up standard wheels and standard cyclocross tyres as tubeless with a bit of hack / bodging, it is more laborious doing it that way, and also frankly, sometimes it just doesn't work. Because you see, a tubeless tyre has a much thicker bead on it that won't stretch on the rim, and the rim itself actually has a larger rim bed diameter. Now both of those things conspire to make the process of fitting tubeless a little bit trickier. But if you follow this process step by step, then I think you will be absolutely fine. Now, in addition to our tubeless wheel and our tubeless tyre, we will need one of these, which is a tubeless valve. And then we'll need some sealant before finally a good quality track pump or something like this. More on that a little bit later. Firstly, you've got to make sure that the rim bed itself is actually airtight. Now, different manufacturers of wheels will have different techniques for this. Reynolds here have already sealed the rim, so that's that blue tape you can see there, whereas other rim designs will actually be completely solid, so you won't have any spoke holes. And then other rim designers will have you actually seal them yourselves using some tape, a little bit like that. Now, it's a very straightforward process. You just got to start at the valve hole, keep it tight, push the tape right into the bed of the rim, and then you'll be sorted. When you've done that, take your valve, push it through the rim, and then secure it, but loosely, okay? And now is probably a very good time to check to see whether you've got a removable valve core. Although we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in the process here, having a removable valve core makes the process of adding sealant much easier. And you know when you've got one, when this point here, literally the valve can actually be removed. And you take it out with a valve core remover, or very carefully with a pair of pliers. Tyre next, and start by seating one side of the tyre in the well of the rim as you would normally. Then, when it comes to doing the next side, I find it really helps to have the wheel resting at my feet here. And what's really important is that you aim to finish up pushing the tyre onto the rim at the valve down at the bottom. So you start on the opposite side, and that helps give us a bit more slack in the tyre, and it also helps us to seat it at the end. Now, as I said, fitting tubeless tyres on tubeless rims can be quite difficult, and so we're going to need to use every trick in the book. So one thing is to make sure the tyre is sat very much in the middle of the rim, because that is the smallest diameter point. That's really going to help. And to do that, you want to just force your thumbs around the bead and try and push any slack to the bottom. And then this one's going to go on pretty easily. Look at that, beautiful. Some tyre manufacturers actually produce a tyre lubricant in order to help seat really difficult tyres. But the other option is to actually just use soap and water. That can actually help to really lubricate the tyre and help it slip on a bit easier. If you don't have a removable valve core, then this is the point, just before you've seated the tyre completely, that you actually need to add your sealant. So you simply pour the right amount, about 2 fluid ounces, so a couple of tablespoons, into the tyre, and then very carefully tip it round to the part of the wheel that's already sealed. That'll stop it going everywhere. With the tyre now on, we need to go back to our valve and push it up so that the tyre is definitely sat either side of it, and then screw it back down. And what that does is it helps to seat the bead of the tyre really firmly, and that is going to help us when we come to pump it up. Sealant time now. We need to remove the valve core and then give the seat a good old shake. And what that does is it helps to distribute all the little micro particles that are in there evenly throughout the solution. And then we simply need to add it. About 50 grams should do the trick, and it will need topping up every now and then. I'd say probably every 4 months or so. Crunch time now, we've got to inflate it. If you really struggle to get your tyre on, then now is where you're going to cash in, because it should make it much easier to inflate it. Given then that this one was so easy to get on, I'm going to pull out a couple of little tricks of the trade to try and get that initial seal. So firstly, we're going to brush some soapy water around between the tyre and the rim. That will help to get that initial seal. And then we're also going to roll the rim along the ground, and that's going to force sealant onto the bead of the tyre as well, and that'll help just make that initial seal. A normal track pump should be able to inflate tubeless setups relatively easily. You might have to pump quite vigorously, but that's not normally too much of a problem. But if you've got 1 or 2 different tubeless setups, you might want to consider investing in something like this, which is a track pump with an air canister that you then inflate up to a pressure of about 160 psi. You can then release it all in one go, and it effectively acts like an air compressor, which should make light work of just about any tubeless setup. Shall we see? Once you've got that initial seal, we then need to inflate the tyre up to about 50 psi. And by that point, you should hear a load of little popping sounds, and that's where the bead is snapping into place on the rim. I'm not going to lie, it is slightly disconcerting, and every time it happens, I do slightly crap myself, but it is essential. But equally, you don't want to overinflate either. And then, once you're up there, and it's holding air, that's my track pump by the way, you need to spin the wheel just to make sure the tyre is in fact seated and there's no wobbles or bulges, which are going to tell you that it's not going to hold air properly, or that it's just not seated. That one looks pretty good. Right, I'm happy that that's on straight and it's holding air, and so now we need to really ideally go for a little spin around the block on your bike and then pop it to one side, and it is done. Nice. Do bear in mind though that a tubeless tyre doesn't generally hold air quite so well as a standard inner tube tyre, so you're probably going to need to top it up every couple of rides or so, but hey, that's a small price to pay for no punctures. Now, I did refer at the beginning of the video to a way of bodging a tubeless setup for cyclocross, so if that piqued your interest, then the video is just up there. Or if you're thinking about this for road, then we actually analysed the benefits of tubeless, tubular and tubed wheels. You can get through to that video just down there. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe to GCN. To do that, just click on the globe.